Her cheating ex grabbed her wrist, then a dangerous stranger called her my baby. Gabriella only wanted to survive her birthday party without falling apart. But Hugo cornered her on the terrace, like the past still owned her. Then Henrique Castro appeared from the shadows, wrapped his hand around Hugo's wrist, and said the words that froze everyone. "That's my baby you retouching." She had never met him before. She should have corrected the lie. Instead, she looked into his dark eyes and said yes, and that one reckless moment pulled her into a world of art, power, secrets, and danger. Before anyone on the terrace understands what is happening, Hugo's hand closes around Gabriella's wrist, too tight, too familiar, too full of ownership. She freezes, her breath caught in the cold October air. Then a man's voice cuts through the music from inside the loft, low and controlled. "That's my baby you're touching." The stranger's hand clamps over Hugo's arm, calm but strong enough to make him flinch. Gabriella turns, shaken, and sees Henrique Castro for the first time. Only minutes earlier, this was supposed to be her 25th birthday party. Now the bass trembles through the floorboards like a warning, and she realizes the night has already slipped out of her control. The crowded loft smells of perfume, sweat, mint, and expensive liquor. Gabriella stands pressed against a cold brick wall, one hand wrapped around a mojito she has not tasted. Nena glides toward her through the flashing lights, red lipstick untouched, eyes bright with a kind of excitement that never asks permission. She taps her glass against Gabriella's and announces that Henrique Castro has arrived. For weeks, Nena has described him as a charming rescuer of forgotten antiques and old fortunes, the sort of man who makes rooms go quiet. Gabriella tries to refuse the introduction, but Nena is already searching the crowd, convinced she is doing something generous. Gabriella escapes before Nena can drag her across the room. The terrace door shuts behind her, muffling the music into a heavy pulse. For a moment, the city below is mercifully still, all silver windows and cold light. She rests both hands on the iron railing and lets herself breathe. Then a voice behind her says her name. She knows it before she turns. Hugo Abro stands in the doorway with the same careless smile, the same sandy hair, the same false softness in his eyes. A year has passed since she found him with another woman, yet he looks at her as if the damage belongs to both of them equally. Hugo says Nena invited him because they needed closure. Gabriella feels the words sink like ice into her chest. Nena, with all her romantic fantasies, has mistaken betrayal for unfinished love. Hugo steps closer, lowering his voice, wearing the expensive cologne that once made her lean into him without thinking. He calls his affair a mistake, one bad night, something that should not erase 2 years. Gabriella tells him to stop. He does not. He whispers the private nickname he used when they were together, and the tenderness of it feels almost dirty now. She understands then that he has not come to apologize. He has come to reclaim control. When Gabriella turns away, Hugo catches her wrist, not hard enough to leave a bruise, but hard enough to remind her of every time he made her doubt her own anger. Her body goes still. The terrace lights blur. Before she can pull free, another figure steps out of the shadows. Henrique Castro does not raise his voice. He simply takes Hugo's arm and repeats, with dangerous calm, that Gabriella is his baby. The lie is outrageous, but the timing is perfect. Hugo stiffens. Gabriella sees the stranger clearly now. Silver hair touched by terrace light, a sharp jaw, a dark suit worn with quiet authority, and eyes that do not blink first. Hugo demands to know whether Gabriella even knows this man. For one breath, she considers telling the truth. It would be safer, cleaner, easier to explain later. But Henrique is standing beside her with the steadiness of a locked door, and Hugo's hand is finally gone from her skin. Gabriella lifts her chin and says yes. Hugo's confidence cracks at once. Henrique tells him to leave. There is no threat in the words, only certainty, which somehow makes them worse. Hugo looks from Henrique to Gabriella, humiliated in a way he will not forget. Then he backs away, muttering that she has made a mistake. Gabriella knows he means it as a promise. The terrace falls quiet after Hugo disappears inside. Gabriella's hands begin to shake now that the danger has passed. Henrique steps back immediately, giving her space, and apologizes for interfering. He explains that Nena mentioned a persistent ex, though she apparently left out the part where she invited him to the party. The small, dry humor in his voice steadies Gabriella more than pity would have. She studies him in the dim light, the slightly crooked nose, the controlled posture, the elegance that feels practiced but not empty. He says he may have made her evening more complicated. Against her better judgment, Gabriella almost laughs. She asks if he often rescues strangers from birthday disasters. Henrique's mouth curves. Only when a woman looks as if she is facing a firing squad, he says, and when a man refuses to understand that no is enough. Gabriella should be embarrassed by the false claim he made. But the words had shielded her at the exact moment she needed one. When she asks about his work, he gives a careful answer. He acquires rare objects, restores lost histories, finds homes for things people have forgotten how to value. A phone vibrates in his pocket and slides the device away too quickly for her not to notice. Henrique makes his profession sound less glamorous than Nena promised. Customs paperwork, stubborn appraisers, endless negotiations, and rich people pretending their family collections are not falling apart. Gabriella finds herself listening more closely than she intended. He has the charm of a man used to being watched, but every so often his attention shifts toward the terrace door, as if he is measuring exits. Before she can ask about it, the door bursts open. Nena rushes out, breathless, eyes wide with panic. She has seen Hugo leave in a rage. In her face, Gabriella sees the guilty hope of a friend who tried to fix something she did not understand. Nena confesses at once. She invited Hugo because she thought he and Gabriella needed one honest conversation. Gabriella stares at her, stunned by the cruelty hidden inside good intentions. She says there was already an honest conversation a year ago, when Hugo chose someone else, and then expected her to stay grateful for the pieces. Nena's face crumples. She begins to apologize, but Gabriella is too tired to comfort her. Behind them, Henrique remains silent, almost invisible in the shadows, and that restraint matters. He does not insert himself into the friendship. He does not perform heroism. He simply lets Gabriella decide what she is willing to forgive. Gabriella makes Nena promise never to arrange anything like that again. Nena nods quickly, ashamed now, though her gaze flickers between Gabriella and Henrique with a new dangerous curiosity. She leaves them alone, with an awkward smile that says she has already begun rewriting the night as destiny. Terror settles around them. Gabriella turns back to Henrique, aware of the strange warmth still lingering where his hand had brushed past hers. He introduces himself properly this time, offering his hand instead of a claim. His palm is warm, his grip firm but careful. For Gabriella, that carefulness is what unsettles her most. Something reckless moves through her, something she thought Hugo had killed. Gabriella looks straight into Henrique's dark eyes and asks whether calling her his baby means she belongs to him now. Henrique does not laugh at her. He steps close enough for her to catch cedarwood, faint tobacco, and the clean edge of rain on his coat. "Not yet," he says softly, "but I would like to earn that privilege, if you allow me." The answer should sound arrogant. Instead, it lands with a patience that makes her pulse stumble. For the first time in a year, danger does not feel like a wound reopening. It feels like blood returning to a numb place. She asks how he plans to earn it. "Dinner," he says, "tomorrow night. Somewhere quiet, away from people who think they know what is best for her." Gabriella knows she should refuse. She should go home, wash off the party, and return to the safe life she has built from routine and caution. Instead, she takes his phone and types in her number, and the brief contact runs through her like electricity. Henrique looks at the screen as if she has given him something more delicate than digits. Then he thanks her, steps back, and disappears into the crowd before the spell can turn awkward. Gabriella remains on the terrace with melted ice in her glass and too many thoughts in her chest. The music inside swells, then fades as the door opens again. Nena appears, trying to look innocent and failing. When Gabriella admits she agreed to dinner, Nena gasps so loudly a couple nearby turns to stare. She says Henrique is exactly the spark Gabriella needs. Gabriella warns her not to turn this into another one of her projects. Nena softens and tells her that for a year she has watched Gabriella live, like someone waiting for pain to knock again. Maybe this time, she says, Gabriella should let something unexpected knock first. The next morning, sunlight cuts through Gabriella's bedroom too sharply for the few hours of sleep she managed. Her phone buzzes on the nightstand. Unknown number. The message is brief, certain, and strangely intimate. Dinner at 8. A car at 7:30. Dress comfortably. No performance. Gabriella reads it 3 times. A private car feels excessive, almost controlling, but the instruction to dress comfortably makes the evening harder to classify. She replies with a simple yes, before she can overthink herself into safety. The moment the message sends, her apartment feels smaller. By noon, she has tried on half her closet and rejected every version of herself. An emerald silk blouse, and the leather jacket she bought after the breakup, back when she needed clothing that felt like armor. At exactly 7:30, the intercom rings. Outside, a black sedan waits by the curb, its windows reflecting rain-streaked streetlights. The driver steps out in a charcoal suit and greets her as Miss Gabriella with a respect that feels rehearsed, but not mocking. As she slides into the leather seat, she notices the faint scent of polished wood and clean smoke. The ride takes her toward the waterfront, past warehouses turned into lofts and buildings that look awake despite their dark windows. The car stops before a massive unmarked building with a single amber doorway. Gabriella steps out, suddenly aware of how quiet the street is. Before she can lift the brass knocker, the door opens. Henrique stands above her on the steps, sleeves rolled to his forearms, his usual polish softened by the warm light behind him. She hides her nerves with a joke about hoping the dinner does not require a survival waiver. Henrique laughs, a real laugh that changes his face. Then his phone vibrates again. He glances at it, the smile fading for less than a second, and turns the screen downward before inviting her inside. The private room is arranged with almost theatrical care. 1 table for 2, low jazz, warm lamps, and a wall of glass overlooking the black water. Henrique pulls out her chair without making the gesture feel like a test. He explains that the chef, Bruno, is an old friend who has cleared the space so they can speak without shouting over strangers. Bruno appears in immaculate white, proud, amused, and clearly fond of Henrique. He offers a tasting menu meant to stretch slowly through the evening. Gabriella nods, overwhelmed despite herself. This is not merely a dinner. It is a door being opened into a life where rules seem negotiable. The first course arrives with the cool scent of the sea. Henrique asks about her work, and Gabriella relaxes because this at least is ground she knows. She tells him about the museum laboratory, about damaged canvases, microscopes, varnish, pigments, and the patience required to bring old beauty back, without pretending the damage never happened. Henrique listens with unusual focus. He does not interrupt to impress her. He asks questions that prove he understands the difference between preserving a thing and owning it. For a moment, Gabriella forgets the private car, the hidden building, the silenced phone. She is simply a woman, talking about the work that saved her. She explains that restoration is part chemistry, part restraint, and part conversation with time. Henrique smiles and says his own work is less noble, finding the right guardians for objects that outlived their makers. He speaks of auctions, estates, shipping routes, and negotiations conducted quietly in rooms where everyone pretends money is not the subject. The second course arrives. Their conversation moves through old cities, books, travel, and the strange grief of objects surviving the people who loved them. Still, Gabriella notices patterns. Henrique never names certain clients. He pauses before answering questions about where rare pieces come from. The pauses are small, but they are there. Over tender lamb, Henrique asks why she chose restoration. Gabriella hesitates before telling him about her grandmother, an artist who slowly disappeared into dementia. Near the end, she could not remember names, streets, or the year, but she could still look at a painting and recognize where the light had been loved. Gabriella's voice thickens and she turns away, embarrassed by the sudden grief. Henrique does not rush to comfort her. He only says her grandmother must have given her a way to see what others miss. The softness in his voice is almost enough to make Gabriella forget the shadow that crossed his face when his phone lit up again. When she asks about his past, Henrique's answer comes more slowly. His father worked at sea, he says, recovering cargo and relics from shipwrecks. Henrique grew up around salt, corroded bronze, wet wood, and men who spoke in half-truths because the ocean kept the rest. He claims he moved to land because sharks in suits are easier to negotiate with than the literal ones. Gabriella laughs, but his eyes do not. For 1 second, something old and hard rises behind them. Then he lifts his glass, changes the subject, and the charm returns so smoothly she wonders whether she imagined the crack. By dessert, dark chocolate and bitter orange, Gabriella feels as if the evening has stretched beyond time. Henrique tells her she made the room feel less empty. She thanks him for the magic, and the word makes him smile sadly. And he admits something that chills the air. He had someone look into her before tonight, enough to know whether she was likely to hate his world or be bored by it. Gabriella goes still. He tells her Nena described her as brilliant, wounded, and too proud to be rescued. It is honest, invasive, and strangely flattering. Before she can answer, his phone vibrates hard against the table. Henrique looks at the screen and the warmth drains from his face. A mask settles over him so quickly, Gabriella feels she has been sitting across from two men all evening. He excuses himself. Through the glass, she watches his silhouette near the hallway, shoulders rigid, one hand pressed to his brow. When he returns, he dismisses it as a shipping delay. But the night has changed. He asks for the bill. Bruno refuses with a discreet shake of the head. On the ride back, Henrique is kind, attentive, and distant. Gabriella knows the dinner was beautiful. She also knows beauty can be arranged to hide machinery. Henrique takes her hand and kisses her knuckles with a reverence that should feel old-fashioned, yet somehow feels dangerous. He asks to see her again. Gabriella says yes, before the warning inside her can become louder. His sedan disappears into the wet street, leaving the smell of rain and cedarwood behind. Inside her apartment, she leans against the locked door and exhales. Nena texts first, demanding details. Gabriella sends only 3 words, "I am alive." A second message arrives from Henrique moments later. He is already counting the hours. Gabriella reads it in bed, smiling despite the unease gathering at the edge of the dream. 3 months later, the dream has grown roots. Gabriella stands in the dim museum laboratory, staring at an offer letter on her screen. Henrique is opening a downtown gallery, and he wants her to direct it. The salary is outrageous. The authority promised is even more so. In those months, there have been candlelit dinners, vineyard weekends, gifts she made him stop sending, almost reachable. But there have also been sudden calls in other languages, cancelled plans, and men who nodded to him with too much fear. Taking the job would mean stepping deeper into his world, and Gabriella cannot pretend that world is simple. Dr. Marta Silva enters the lab without knocking, as she always does when worry outweighs manners. Marta taught Gabriella how to clean a canvas without erasing its age. Now she studies her student with the same careful eye she gives damaged paint. She asks about the gallery. Gabriella tries to sound calm and fails. Henrique's money, his private collectors, the speed with which doors open for him. She asks the question Gabriella has been avoiding. Is this offer a recognition of your talent or a leash wrapped in silk? Gabriella wants to defend him, but the answer does not come quickly enough. Marta warns her with the blunt tenderness of someone who has seen ambitious women swallowed by powerful men. Henrique may adore her, she says, but adoration can become possession when a man is used to bending rooms around his will. Gabriella bristles. She loves him, she admits before she means to say it. The word lands between them, frightening in its honesty. Marta's face softens, but she does not take the warning back. Love does not make a cage less real. If Gabriella accepts, she must demand terms, boundaries, lawyers, and a door she can walk through without asking permission. That night, she carries Marta's words into Henrique's penthouse. Henrique cooks dinner himself, sleeves rolled, hair slightly mussed, the domestic image almost convincing. He notices her silence before the first glass of wine is finished. Gabriella asks directly whether the gallery is meant to honor her work or keep her close where he can watch her. For once, Henrique does not answer at once. The pause frightens her more than denial would have. Then he brings out a contract, independent hiring authority, profit participation, and protections that make it clear he anticipated this fear. He says he wants her because she sees art as something alive, not because she shares his bed. Gabriella reads the terms slowly, almost too generous, and that too can be a form of pressure. She asks why he wants a public gallery when his private deals already make him rich. Henrique turns the wine glass between his fingers until the dark liquid catches the light. He says he wants something clean, something open, something that can stand in daylight without someone whispering about its shadow. The answer feels rehearsed until she sees the exhaustion underneath it. She insists her lawyer review the contract, and that she finish 2 months at the museum. Henrique agrees, patient and smiling, but his relief is impossible to miss. During those 2 months, Gabriella notices more. A painting she has pursued for years suddenly becomes available. A delayed permit clears in a single afternoon. A collector who once ignored her now calls her ma'am and asks whether Mr. Castro received his apology. When Gabriella questions Henrique, he says favors and debts keep the art world moving. His smile tightens when he adds that there is nothing sinister about it. She had not used that word. Still, she signs. The gallery takes shape around her, with white walls, clean lines, and a collection that makes critics lean forward. For the first time, Gabriella feels powerful. She also feels watched. The first warning arrives as a missing file. Gabriella finds an acquisition folder open on her desk, one page gone, and the rest placed too neatly to be an accident. The painting is a small Venetian seascape, beautiful but oddly over-documented, as if someone has tried too hard to prove its innocence. Henrique says it is probably a clerical error, but he calls security before finishing the sentence. That afternoon, a junior registrar resigns without notice, leaving behind a badge, a blank computer, and a trembling voice message that says only, "I'm sorry." Gabriella listens to it 3 times, each time colder than the last. 3 days before the opening, the illusion cracks wide. Gabriella is alone in the main hall, studying the Venetian seascape, when a man steps out from a restricted corridor. Eastern European, rumpled, expensive, and far too comfortable. He looks around the gallery as if he owns the dust in its corners. Gabriella introduces herself as director, and asks who allowed him inside. His eyes slide over her. "The girlfriend," he says, almost amused. When she tells him to leave, he speaks a few sharp words into a silver phone and thrusts the screen toward her. Henrique's voice comes through, hard and controlled. "Take Alexei upstairs. Use the brass key under your desk." The brass key opens a private office Gabriella did not know existed. It is windowless, sterile, and cold. Nothing like the luminous gallery below. Alexei drops into a leather chair and tells her Henrique always did have good taste in loyal women. Gabriella keeps her face still, though anger burns through her embarrassment. She asks what he wants. Alexei smiles, showing a flash of gold tooth, and says he is here for a debt, a painting, and a reminder. The reminder is for Gabriella. He places the missing page from the Venetian seascape folder on the desk and taps it with one thick finger. "People who ask where things came from," he says, "should also ask who wants them back." Henrique arrives pale with fury. The way both men look at each other tells Gabriella this is not a misunderstanding. It is history. Henrique demands to know why Alexei broke their arrangement. Alexei answers that arrangements belong to men who pay on time and keep old promises. Henrique unlocks a hidden safe behind a blank panel and removes a thick envelope heavy with cash. Gabriella's stomach turns, enjoying the silence, then warns her to protect the gallery's golden reputation before it bleeds. After he leaves, Gabriella asks Henrique whether illicit cash is part of her business. Henrique says no, admits the money belongs to a life he has been trying to bury. Henrique tells her about his father without romance. The salvage company recovered treasure, yes, but it also moved stolen works, contraband, and favors across borders for men who never put their names on paper. When his father died, Henrique inherited not only assets but obligations. He has spent years selling, untangling, paying, refusing, and trying to move everything legitimate into daylight. The Venetian seascape, he swears, is clean, but Alexei wants to use it as leverage because it once passed through one of his father's old warehouses. Gabriella wants to believe him. She also wants to scream. The dream with her name on the door suddenly feels built beside a sinkhole. She asks for no more secrets. Henrique promises, but the promise has to fight the room around it. The opening arrives 3 nights later, glittering and tense. The gallery fills with collectors, critics, champagne, and the soft rustle of money disguised as taste. Henrique introduces Gabriella as the mind behind the exhibition, and for a while the room belongs to her. People praise the curation. They admire the restraint. Nena corners her near the champagne and asks why her hands are shaking. Gabriella whispers enough of the truth to make Nena's face change. Then Nena admits she already knew Henrique's family was dangerous. The betrayal lands almost quietly. Nena says Henrique has spent years trying to separate himself from his father's sins. She says she believed he deserved a chance, and Gabriella deserved someone who would fight for her. Gabriella can barely answer. Before the argument can become public, the glass doors swing open. Hugo walks in, drunk but not careless, pale with triumph. His collar is torn, his eyes feverish, and a black flash drive hangs from his fist like a weapon. He points at Gabriella and shouts that everyone should applaud the girlfriend of a criminal. Phones rise almost instantly. Henrique appears at her side, the room around him cooling. Hugo shouts that the gallery is nothing but a washing machine for cartel money. Then he adds something worse. He claims to have shipping manifests, payment trails, and a witness who can prove Gabriella's name sits on forged acquisitions. Gabriella feels the blood leave her face. Hugo smiles directly at her, and she understands his motive at last. He does not only want Henrique ruined, he wants Gabriella dragged down with him, punished for becoming more than the woman he abandoned. Henrique's hand tightens at her waist, not possessive this time, but restraining himself from crossing a line he cannot uncross. Two large men move toward Hugo, but Hugo raises the flash drive higher. Hugo laughs and says if anyone touches him, the files go live. For a second, no one moves. Then Alexei appears near the back wall, half hidden among guests, watching with a faint smile that confirms the trap is larger than Hugo's bitterness. Gabriella sees it before Henrique does. Hugo is not the mastermind. He is the match someone else handed to a bitter man. Henrique speaks calmly, telling security to let Hugo leave. The choice humiliates him more than force would have. Hugo backs toward the door, promising that, by morning, everyone will know what Gabriella really signed. The guests remain frozen, deciding whether to flee, film, or pretend they heard nothing. Henrique addresses the room with perfect control. He describes Hugo as an unstable ex-boyfriend, armed with stolen and doctored documents, but the explanation is no longer enough to calm everyone. Several critics leave. The major collector withdraws his handshake midair. Gabriella survives the evening on instinct, smiling until her cheeks ache. When the last guest is gone, she climbs the stairs toward Henrique's office. The door is partly open. Inside, he speaks in the same hard language Alexei used, his voice low and lethal. Gabriella waits until he hangs up. Then she steps in and asks whether her gallery is funded by crime. Henrique swears the gallery is legitimate. Gabriella tells him that legitimate is not the same as honest. She wants to know who he is beneath the suit, the manners, and the beautiful dinners. The question finally breaks through his control. He pours liquor with an unsteady hand and tells her the full truth. His father was not simply a salvage man who bent rules. He built routes for smugglers, hid stolen masterworks, and taught Henrique logistics before Henrique was old enough to understand the cost. At 16, Henrique was already carrying messages for men whose names never appeared in court records. He says he has spent his adult life trying to get out. Gabriella asks why Alexei is still owed money, and why Hugo suddenly has documents that name her. Henrique looks older when he answers. Because Alexei kept fragments of his father's old files. Because Hugo, angry and reckless, was easy to feed. Because men like Alexei do not always destroy with bullets. Sometimes they hand your enemy just enough truth to make a lie believable. Gabriella hears the truth in him, but truth does not make her safer. She asks whether he ever used her, whether her talent gave his redemption a prettier face. Henrique drops to his knees, not theatrically, but as if his legs have failed. He says she is the only clean thing he never tried to purchase. The confession does not comfort her. Gabriella tells him she needs to leave and think. He offers a driver, she refuses. Outside, cold air hits her like punishment. In the taxi, city lights blur against the window while Henrique's promise echoes behind her. He will prove himself. Her phone glows with messages all night. Apologies, explanations, silence followed by more apologies. At dawn, an unknown number sends her a photo of the Venetian seascape with one sentence beneath it. Ask your lover what was hidden behind the frame. Gabriella sits upright in bed, heart hammering, because the nightmare has learned her name. 3 years do not pass peacefully so much as carefully. Henrique cuts ties one by one, and Gabriella insists on independent audits outside counsel, and provenance checks so strict that several collectors complain. Venetian seascape is returned to a family foundation, after Gabriella discovers a false transfer buried behind 3 shell companies. Henrique agrees without protest. Even though the loss is expensive and public, the gallery becomes respected despite the whispers. Their mornings become ordinary: coffee, work, quiet teasing, the fragile comfort of a life rebuilt after fire. Then, on a gray afternoon, federal agents walk through the gallery doors. Their badges flash under the clean white lights. Nothing buried stays patient forever. Agents Carvalho and his thieves introduce themselves with polite smiles that do not reach their eyes. They hand Gabriella a list of acquisitions, and her chest tightens when she sees the Venetian seascape at the top, though it is no longer even in the building. Carvalho begins gently, asking about a shipping company used before her tenure. As Steves watches her hands, Gabriella understands the strategy. They are not there because they think she forged papers. They are there because the gallery is a door, and she may be the hinge that opens it. She calls Teresa Abro, her attorney, before answering anything beyond procedure. The name Abro still tastes strange because Teresa is Hugo's cousin. But unlike Hugo, she has never mistaken cruelty for cleverness. Teresa arrives like a blade in a black coat. She reads the warrant, asks for copies, and draws boundaries in a voice so calm it makes the agents more careful. Gabriella manages the art, the collection, and the public operations, Teresa says. She does not handle Henrique's legacy accounts, his father's companies, or any private logistics predating the gallery. If the agents want those records, they can request them properly. Gabriella watches Carvalho's eyes narrow. For 3 hours, they photograph files, ask repeated questions, and circle back to names she has heard only in fragments. Alexi's name never appears on the list. Hugo's does. That frightens her more than if Alexi had signed every page. When the agents finally leave, the gallery feels contaminated by their absence. Gabriella calls Henrique from the empty office. His voice is hollow. They raided his office an hour earlier. He tells her not to say anything to anyone without Teresa present, not even Nena. The command is practical, but it lands like secrecy returning through a back door. Gabriella asks him what he has done. The silence that follows is too long. Then he says the gallery is clean. She notices he does not say he is. That night, she goes home to find Nena waiting in the lobby, pale, frightened, and finally done, pretending this world is only dramatic. Over wine neither of them enjoys. Gabriella tells Nena everything she had once tried to soften. Henrique's father, the syndicate debts, Alexei, Hugo's flash drive, the hidden room, and the years of trying to escape. Nena listens without defending herself this time. She admits she believed love could outrun history if the right people wanted it badly enough. Gabriella almost laughs at the cruelty of that innocence. The investigators want a thread, a name, a contradiction, maybe even a woman tired enough to save herself by handing them the man she loves. Nena asks the question no friend wants to ask. If the truth hurts Henrique, will Gabriella still tell it? Weeks turn into subpoenas, frozen accounts, and cold hallways where everyone speaks softly because fear has made them polite. New acquisitions, and Gabriella is placed on administrative leave from her own position while auditors review every signature. Reporters wait outside her apartment. Collectors pull back. One foundation withdraws completely. Then a restoration assistant finds a small recorder taped beneath a work table in Gabriella's lab. It is dead, but not old. Henrique wants private security posted at the gallery overnight. Gabriella agrees only after Teresa insists. 2 days later, an anonymous envelope arrives with a printed line from Hugo. Tell them what he is, or I will tell them what you helped him hide. Gabriella has hidden nothing, but fear does not need truth to do damage. The next morning, Carvalho calls Teresa with a harder tone. Gabriella is not merely a witness anymore. Her name appears on too many documents from Hugo's drive, and until the files are disproven, she is a person of interest. Henrique goes white when Teresa says it. He reaches for the old solution first: money, influence, men who can make pressure move elsewhere. Gabriella stops him with one look. If he protects her by becoming the man she feared, they lose everything anyway. Henrique lowers his hand, shaken, and says he understands. Henrique does not ask her to lie. That matters. He tells her to speak only the truth, even if the truth makes him look worse before it clears him. Then he does something harder. He tells Teresa about an encrypted ledger his father left behind, a record of routes, shell companies, payments, names Henrique had kept sealed because opening it would put Giesman in prison, and perhaps put him there beside them. Gabriella stares at him, stunned. The ledger could save her, Teresa says, if it proves Hugo's files came from old stolen fragments. It could also destroy the last protection Henrique has. For once, no one in the room mistakes love for comfort. In the interrogation room, the agents push carefully. They suggest Henrique used the gallery to polish his name, that her position was part of the design, that love has made intelligent women blind before. Gabriella does not take the bait. She tells them what she knows, what she verified, and what she refused to sign until corrected. She also tells them what she does not know, refusing to turn suspicion into testimony. Then Carvalho slides a formal notice across the table. If the forged signatures are not disproven, the charges may follow. Gabriella's throat tightens, but her voice remains steady. She will not invent a betrayal, simply because fear has become convenient. The deposition is worse. Lawyers try to turn her into a decoration with a title. A loyal lover placed in front of white walls to make dirty money look cultured. Then they introduce Hugo's flash drive. Its files look convincing at first glance. Manifests, payments, edited emails. Her signature beside shipments she never approved. Gabriella asks for the metadata. The room shifts. Teresa smiles for the first time in weeks. The dates expose part of the fraud, but not enough. Several files were built from real archived templates. Someone with access to old Castro records had fed Hugo pieces that could survive casual inspection. The lie is cracking, but it is not dead. Nena finally stops apologizing and starts acting. Orm of Urim, remembering the terrifying registrar's voice met, she tracks the woman through an old roommate, then through a clinic receipt, then to a cheap motel near the highway. She goes without telling Gabriella, terrified the woman will run if lawyers arrive first. The registrar is shaking when Nena finds her, convinced Alexei's men are watching the parking lot. Nena sits on the floor outside the bathroom door for 2 hours, talking softly about every mistake she herself made by confusing interference with love. At dawn, the registrar agrees to meet Teresa. It is the first useful thing Nena has done in the story she nearly ruined. The registrar testifies that Alexei paid her to remove files, frighten Gabriella, and pass old templates to Hugo. But Alexei's network still hides behind layers of dead companies and encoded accounts. Henrique knows what comes next before Teresa says it. The ledger. He spends one night alone in his office with the sealed drive on the desk, staring at the last inheritance his father left him. By morning, his face looks hollow but clear. He gives the password to Teresa, then to the federal agents, knowing it may expose every compromise he ever made while trying to escape. Gabriella watches him sign the release. This is the choice she needed to see. The ledger changes everything. It shows which roots belonged to Henrique's father, which payments were made before Henrique took control, and which transactions Henrique refused, closed, or reported through attorneys. It also proves Hugo's documents were assembled from stolen fragments after the gallery opening, and uglier in daylight. A bitter man who accepted evidence from criminals because it helped him punish a woman who escaped him. Alexei's name finally enters the record in full. His old roots, shell companies, threats, and payments begin to connect to investigations far beyond the gallery. For the first time, the storm no longer feels aimed only at Gabriella. It turns toward the people who created it. After 8 brutal months, the call comes on a rainy afternoon. Henrique's voice breaks before he finishes the sentence. The government has cleared the gallery. No charges. No evidence that Gabriella's work, staff, or acquisitions were used for laundering. The person of interest notice is withdrawn. Hugo has been arrested for evidence tampering and possession of stolen documents. Separate investigations into Alexei's network continue, but the gallery survives. Gabriella sinks into a chair, relief moving through her so sharply it hurts. That evening, she finds Henrique in the empty main hall, standing beneath a painting she restored by hand. He says she survived what should have crushed her. She says they survived. He shakes his head. "You stood where I had no right to ask you to stand," he whispers. Henrique tells her the investigation forced the last bridges to burn. Men who once used his father's name can no longer pretend he belongs to them. He has handed over the ledger, cut remaining accounts, and accepted that some doors must be locked forever, even if money waits behind them. Gabriella asks how freedom feels. Henrique takes a long breath as if testing his lungs after years underwater. "Frightening," he says. "Clean, but frightening." Then he admits the ledger may still bring consequences for him later. Gabriella takes his hand anyway, not because she is blind to that risk, but because for the first time he chose truth before safety. They rebuild slowly. Transparency becomes not a slogan but a daily discipline. Every acquisition carries a public trail. Every donor is vetted. Every shadow is questioned before it can become a room. Some clients never return, but better ones arrive. Museums, foundations, artists. People who trust a place that survived scrutiny without collapsing. Henrique no longer moves like an invisible king. He asks, documents, waits, and sometimes loses. Gabriella watches him accept losing, without reaching for the old machinery. That is when she begins to believe him in a deeper way. Not because he says he has changed, but because change has finally cost him something visible. One evening, after the last staff member leaves, Henrique asks Gabriella to walk through the gallery with him. He stops before the first painting she ever selected for the collection, and tells her he wants the rest of his life with her. Not because she made him feel clean, because she saw him whole, the damage, the effort, the cowardice, the courage, all of it. Gabriella feels tears rise before she can stop them. Their love has never been simple enough for fairy tales. It has been examined under harsh light, like a damaged canvas, and somehow there is still color worth preserving. They leave the gallery that night under a street lamp, and Henrique thanks her for a faith he once believed he did not deserve. Gabriella tells him it was never blind faith. She believed what she could verify, challenged what she could not, and stayed only where truth allowed her to stand. Henrique accepts the correction with a small smile. In the car, the city passes in gold and black. Gabriella feels exhaustion first, then peace, then the startling thought that their life may finally belong to them. Not to Hugo's bitterness, not to Alexi's threats, not to Henrique's father, and not to the agents who tried to turn love into leverage. 6 months pass with a gentleness neither of them trusts at first. The gallery thrives again. Henrique keeps his books open, his calls ordinary, and his promises smaller but stronger. Their evenings fill with cooking, tired laughter, half-finished glasses of wine, and the quiet intimacy of people who no longer need every silence filled. Friends tease them for acting careful around happiness, as if joy might crack if handled too quickly. Then on an ordinary Tuesday, Gabriella realizes she is late, 3 weeks late. The thought follows her through the day, through a meeting, through dinner, through a night where Henrique sleeps beside her while she stares at the ceiling. Next afternoon, Gabriella sits on the bathroom floor with a positive test in her shaking hand. 2 lines. The room seems to tilt around them. She had imagined children only in distant, softened ways, always later, always after one more year of peace. Now the future is not an idea. It is inside her, small and undeniable. Fear rises first. Henrique has spent his life escaping the damage of fathers and sons, bloodlines and inheritance. A child would not be a romantic gesture. It would be a permanent claim on both of them. Gabriella presses one hand to her stomach and feels wonder arrive carefully, as if afraid of startling her. She waits 3 days because the news feels too sacred for a rushed confession. Then she prepares dinner at her apartment, lights candles, and rehearses a dozen calm ways to say what cannot be made calm. When Henrique arrives, his smile nearly undoes her. He notices at once that something is wrong. Gabriella tells him she has news, and before she can stop herself, she begins to defend him against obligations he has not refused. She says she is not trying to trap him, not trying to force a family onto a man who has survived enough chains. Henrique's expression tightens, fear and tenderness crossing his face together. Gabriella places the test on the table. 6 weeks, she says. Silence fills the apartment. Henrique stares at the small plastic test as if it has opened a door behind his ribs. Gabriella sees him travel somewhere inward, past their gallery, past the investigation, past every promise he has made, back to a boy raised by a father who mistook power for protection. When he finally looks at her, his eyes are wet. She starts speaking too fast, telling him he owes her nothing and can take time. Henrique stops her with 2 words, rough and immediate. "Marry me." Gabriella blinks, stunned. He moves around the table and lowers himself to one knee. Henrique takes her hands, which are cold despite the candles. "This is not panic," he says. "Not duty." He has wanted to ask for months, but he waited because he wanted no shadow standing between them when he did. He admits the ring is not ready. He had been working with an artisan, trying to make something that was not merely expensive but honest. Gabriella laughs through tears, because it is the most human failure he could have chosen. He says he wants the child, the marriage, the fear, the ordinary mornings, the difficult nights, all of it. She tells him he does not have to be perfect. He says he knows. He only has to stay. Gabriella says yes under the soft candlelight, not because the proposal solves the fear, but because it does not deny it. They sit on the kitchen floor afterward, dinner forgotten, Henrique's hand resting cautiously over her stomach, as if asking permission from someone no larger than a secret. In the weeks that follow, he becomes almost unbearably careful. He reads medical books, makes lists, asks too many questions, and learns the difference between support and command only, because Gabriella reminds him often. Nena, now determined to earn her place instead of forcing it, handles the wedding plans with tenderness and restraint. 3 weeks later, Henrique brings the ring to the empty gallery. It is made from gold coins his father once recovered from a shipwreck, melted down and reshaped by a local artisan. Gabriella looks at it for a long time before letting him place it on her finger. Henrique says he wanted to turn a piece of inheritance into a vow instead of a burden. She tells him the ring is beautiful, but what matters is what he does with the hands that wear no gold. He understands. He promises no easy road, only loyalty, honesty, and the hard work of becoming the father he never had. This time, Gabriella believes the promise because it sounds difficult. The woo takes place 3 months later on Nena's terrace, the same place where everything began with a lie. Hugo in the doorway, no stranger stepping from shadows. There are lanterns, a small gathering, a sky washed in rose and gold, and Gabriella in a cream gown that moves softly around the first visible curve of her pregnancy. Remembers the first night, his voice, his claim, his careful not yet. They turn that old banter into vows. He tells her she is finally his, not as property but as home. Gabriella answers that he is hers, not as rescue but as choice. 6 months later, their daughter Helena arrives with a cry that fills the delivery room and rearranges Henrique's entire face. The man who faced prosecutors, smugglers, and public ruin without shaking weeps openly as he holds her. He tells the tiny sleeping child that he does not deserve such grace, then catches himself and corrects it. He will spend his life learning how to deserve it. Gabriella hears the change and closes her eyes. That is the father she wanted for their daughter. Not a perfect man, but one willing to correct the old language before it becomes another inheritance. Helena's fist curls around his finger, and Henrique breaks all over again. Helena brings bright, chaotic disorder into their careful life. The gallery continues to grow, but evenings are now measured by bottles, bathwater, tiny socks, and Henrique whispering art history to a baby who mostly chews on his sleeve. 3 years pass in exhaustion and wonder. Helena grows into a child with her father's fierce stare and Gabriella's patient hands. For their 3rd anniversary, they return to Nena's terrace, with Helena balanced between them. The city glitters below, less threatening now, though Gabriella knows better than to call any happiness untouchable. It is not untouchable. It is tended, guarded, repaired when needed, like everything else that survives, and demands to know which lights belong to the gallery. Henrique lifts her higher and lets Gabriella answer. Then he turns to Gabriella and asks what she is thinking. She smiles, remembering the night he claimed her as his only to shield her from Hugo. She remembers teasing him, asking whether she belonged to him now, and admits he knew he was in trouble the moment she asked. And woman should have been able to look at him with that much challenge in her eyes. The old not yet has become a yes built over years, not stolen in a single dramatic moment. Later, when Helena falls asleep against Henrique's shoulder, he carries her through the gallery one last time before they go home. The building is quiet, all polished floors and soft security lights. He stops before the restitution wall, where the story of the Venetian seascape is displayed openly. The missing file, the false transfer, the return to the family foundation, and the names of the people who tried to bury it. Gabriella had insisted on that wall. Henrique had agreed. Their daughter sleeps between them, while the proof of his choices stands in the open. That, more than any speech, is how Gabriella knows he changed. The next morning, Gabriella returns to the gallery early, before staff and collectors can fill it with noise. She finds Henrique already there, not in his office, but on the floor with Helena's abandoned crayons, sketching a crooked sun, because their daughter had demanded one for the restoration room. He looks up, embarrassed by the tenderness of being caught. For years, Gabriella feared his power. Now she notices the smaller evidence, the phone left face up, the unlocked doors, the records anyone can inspect, the patience with which he lets ordinary life interrupt him. Redemption has become less dramatic than she expected, and that is why it feels real. Nena visits that afternoon carrying pastries, flowers, and a folder Gabriella has not seen before. Inside are copies of the motel receipts, messages and notes from the night Nena found the registrar. Nena says she kept them not to ask for praise, but because Gabriella deserved proof that this time she had helped without trying to control the ending. Gabriella looks across the room at Henrique, balancing Helena on his hip, then back at the friend who once nearly handed her to Hugo. Not erase carelessness, but sometimes a person earns the right to remain by learning exactly where not to step. Hugo's name returns only once, years later, when Teresa sends Gabriella the final notice from court. Hugo has accepted a plea for possession of stolen documents, evidence tampering, and harassment. He will not come near her again. Gabriella reads the page twice, expecting satisfaction. Instead, she feels only distance. The man who once made her question her worth has become a small legal fact at the bottom of someone else's file. Henrique notices the paper and asks whether she is all right. Gabriella says yes and means it. That is not revenge. It is freedom arriving so quietly she almost misses the sound. Alexei disappears from their world in a different way. His network is dismantled by men with badges, patience, and the testimony of people he once frightened into silence. Teresa sends the news in a single message. Another door closed. Henrique reads it twice, then sets the phone down without triumph. Gabriella waits for the old tension to return to his shoulders, but it does not. He only asks whether Helena has eaten dinner. That simple question nearly breaks her. Once, every message from the shadows could bend the whole room. Now the darkness knocks and no one opens. It is not innocence. It is distance earned through years of refusing to answer. At the gallery's anniversary exhibition, Gabriella chooses a theme that makes Henrique smile: provenance of light. Every piece is displayed with its full story, including damage, loss, restoration, ownership, and the names of those who fought to return it to the open. Critics call the exhibition brave. Gabriella calls it necessary. Henrique gives no speech about redemption. Instead, he stands near the entrance and personally thanks the small museum that received a recovered painting from his father's hidden holdings. The gesture is quiet, almost easy to overlook, but Gabriella sees it. He is no longer trying to look clean. He is doing the work clean hands require. Helena, now old enough to ask difficult questions, points to the public records and asks why some beautiful things have sad stories. Gabriella kneels beside her and says beauty can survive being mishandled, but that does not excuse the hands that hurt it. Henrique listens from a few steps away, his face still. Later, he tells Helena that his family once made terrible choices, and his job is to make different ones. Gabriella watches their daughter absorb this without fear. The past has not been hidden from her. It has been translated into responsibility, which may be the only honest inheritance they can give. That evening, after the guests leave, Gabriella walks alone through the darkened hall. She runs her fingers along the edge of a restored frame and thinks of her grandmother, of memory failing, of beauty remaining. She thinks of the woman she was on her 25th birthday, pressed against a brick wall, with a drink melting in her hand, believing her heart had become something to protect at all costs. She wishes she could tell that younger woman that protection would matter, but so would risk. Not reckless surrender, not blind trust, the kind of risk that still keeps its eyes open. Henrique finds her there and does not ask what she is thinking right away. He has learned that silence is sometimes an invitation, not a problem to solve. When she finally turns, he holds out his hand. The gesture is simple. No claim, no performance, no danger dressed as romance. Just a hand offered and waiting. Gabriella takes it. Together they turn off the last gallery light. The city outside is restless, bright, and full of old ghosts. But inside the glass doors, there is only the soft sound of Helena sleeping in the office, and two people choosing the same road again. Years earlier, Henrique had told Gabriella he wanted to earn the privilege of being near her. He spends the rest of his life learning that love is not earned once and kept forever. It is earned in the ordinary repetitions. Telling the truth when silence would be easier, stepping back when control feels tempting, staying gentle when fear tries to become command. So when people ask how their story began, Gabriella says it started with a lie on a terrace. Henrique corrects her softly. It started, he says, with someone finally letting go of her wrist. Both versions are true. What followed was a long, difficult restoration until something honest remained. Honest was more than enough. Every mafia boss story is not only about power, money, revenge, or fear. Beneath the violence and darkness, there is often a painful human lesson about choices, consequences, loyalty, family, and the price of ambition. This story reminds us that no matter how powerful a person becomes, no one can escape the truth forever. Hundreds of people, and make others tremble at the sound of his name. But if his heart is empty, his victory is never complete. The mafia boss in this story represents a man who built his life on control. He believed that fear was stronger than love, that silence was safer than honesty, and that power could protect him from pain. For years, He may have won every battle in the streets, in business, and among his enemies. But the most important battle was never outside him. It was inside his own heart. That is where he truly lost himself. One of the most meaningful lessons from this story is that power without morality becomes a prison. Many people dream of becoming rich, respected, or feared. They think success means having control over others. But real success is not measured by how many people obey you. It is measured by how many lives you protect, how much peace you create, and how much good remains after you are gone. The mafia boss had money, influence, and protection, but he did not have peace. His life shows us that a person can be surrounded by luxury and still feel completely alone. Another important lesson is that loyalty is valuable, but blind loyalty can destroy lives. In the world of crime, loyalty is often treated like the highest law. People are expected to follow orders without question. Never mean giving up your conscience. A loyal person does not simply protect someone else's secrets. A loyal person also has the courage to stop someone from destroying themselves. This story teaches us that loyalty without honesty is dangerous. Real loyalty should be connected to truth, respect, and moral responsibility. The story also shows the heavy cost of revenge. Revenge often feels powerful in the beginning. It gives a person the illusion that pain can be answered with pain, but revenge rarely heals anything. Instead, it creates a chain of suffering that keeps growing. One act of revenge leads to another. One betrayal leads to another. In the end, everyone loses something. The mafia boss may have believed that revenge would restore his honor, but what it truly did was steal his humanity piece by piece. This is a powerful reminder that forgiveness is not weakness. Sometimes, forgiveness is the strongest decision a person can make because it breaks the cycle of hatred. Family is another central lesson in this kind of story. Many mafia bosses claim they do everything for family. They say they commit crimes to protect the people they love. But protection without honesty can become another form of harm. A family does not only need money or security. A family needs trust, emotional safety, and love that is not poisoned by fear. If a father, husband, brother, or son becomes powerful but loses the ability to show tenderness, then his family may live in a beautiful house, but still feel trapped inside it. This story reminds us that children and loved ones often pay the price for the choices of powerful men. The mafia boss may think his decisions only affect his enemies, but every secret, every violent act, and every betrayal leaves a shadow over the innocent people around him. That is why one of the strongest educational messages is this: before making a decision, we must ask ourselves who will suffer because of it. A selfish choice may bring temporary success, but it can create long-term pain for the people we love most. Another meaningful point is the danger of pride. Pride can make a person refuse to apologize, refuse to change, and refuse to admit they are wrong. The mafia boss may have spent years believing that saying sorry would make him look weak, but in reality, the ability to apologize is a sign of strength. It takes courage to face the damage we have caused. It takes maturity to admit that we hurt someone, and it takes true character to change before it is too late. The story also teaches that redemption is possible, but it always requires sacrifice. A person cannot simply say they have changed. They must prove it through action. Redemption means accepting responsibility, protecting the innocent, telling the truth, and sometimes losing everything that was built on lies. For a mafia boss, redemption may mean walking away from power, exposing corruption, saving someone he once endangered, or choosing love over control. The path to redemption is painful, because it forces a person to confront the worst parts of themselves. But it is also the only path that can lead to peace. From a human perspective, this story is powerful because it shows that even the hardest heart can still feel pain. Behind the cold eyes of a mafia boss, there may be regret, loneliness, childhood wounds, or a deep fear of being betrayed. This does not excuse his actions, but it helps us understand that broken people often break others when they never learn how to heal. The educational value here is important. Pain should not become an excuse to hurt people. Instead, pain should become a reason to grow, to seek wisdom, and to choose a better path. For viewers, the lesson is not to admire the criminal lifestyle, but to understand its emptiness. The suits, cars, mansions, and power may look attractive from the outside, but behind them there is often fear, guilt, and loss. A life built on violence can never bring true happiness. A life built on lies can never bring true freedom. And a life built on fear can never create real love. In the end, the story of a mafia boss is really a warning. It warns us that every choice has a consequence. It warns us that money cannot buy peace. It warns us that fear cannot replace respect. It warns us that revenge cannot heal a wounded heart. Most importantly, it reminds us that the greatest power a person can have is not the power to control others, but the power to control themselves. The deepest lesson is simple but meaningful. Choose character over pride, love over control, truth over silence, and forgiveness over revenge. No matter how dark a person's past may be, change is possible when they are willing to face the truth. But the longer someone waits, the higher the price becomes. A mafia boss may win the streets, defeat his enemies, and build an empire, but if he loses his soul, he has lost everything. True strength is not found in violence. True strength is found in responsibility, compassion, humility, and the courage to become better before it is too late.